Welcome to the People Strategy Forum podcast. We're a show that guides leaders on how to elevate the workforce, and we believe that people are at the heart of successful organizations. A team member's well being, their rewards, career development, it's all essential to a happy, healthy, and highly productive workforce. So, this show discusses the practical and effective leadership strategies for top executives, senior professionals, and talent managers overall. And so, first, I'd love to take some time to introduce our hosts. Today, we have Howard Neisowitz with us. He's a seasoned compensation advisor and strategic HR consultant with over 30 years of experience. And also, we have with us Shar Miller. She's a strategy skills consultant at the Strategic Thinking Institute. And also, we do some work together here at CompTeam. So I'm glad to have Shar. She has an expertise in talent management strategies, in career coaching and entrepreneur coaching. She does a lot of transformations for people out there. So, but overall, I'd like to introduce you to Kathleen Jinkerson. We're going to dive into the topic of the ethical use of AI in HR. So, Kathleen, as a vice president of HR in Total Reward Solutions at the Talent Company, she brings a treasure trove of experience in human resources and talent management. She is celebrated for her dynamic leadership in enhancing people practices and guiding organizations globally to harness HR innovation solutions. And today she's an advocate on AI, and we're going to learn from her on that. So we're going to share how to use AI ethically and how it can transform HR practices while ensuring fairness and privacy. And she's going to aim on ways around how to mentor you, all you listeners out there, and how to use AI effectively. So join us as we go through this enlightening discussion that promises how do we reshape and how we think about AI in the workplace. So, welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you for the invitation to speak today.
Yes. And so, as we start off, I mean, it's kind of traditional for us on this show to kind of dive into your background a little bit as we launch. And so, I would love just to hear a little bit about you, how you got into the business of HR, and then what inspired you in your recent views on AI and its ethical use.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I guess the first thing to know about me and the consulting firm that I work for, the Talent Company, is our mission is to help organizations achieve their goals through their people. And so whether it's helping with specific culture or people strategies and practices, we're big believers in the value of work and in creating meaningful work experiences for your employees as a way of achieving what your organization's goals are. And so this is something that's really important to me. I'm a big believer that, we are all holistic beings. We have lots of dimensions to us. And that work is one of the areas where we do spend a lot of our time and attention goes towards our work experiences. And so big believer in working with organizations to create positive employee experiences and development opportunities in the service of, again, helping the organization and the individuals achieve what it is that they're trying to do. At a practical level, I, started off in university with a business degree, and then actually went into working with a large multinational organization as a project manager. And one of my client groups was HR, so did a lot of HR work with them. And I was like, hey, you know what? I really like this element of business management. I think that HR is really, as much as we can sometimes feel a bit like we're at the kiddie table, we do actually have a significant impact on the organization. And so as I was thinking about my own career goals and how I wanted to spend my time, HR is where I wanted to be. And so when I started to think about what that would look like, I wanted the consulting side because I'm someone who loves big picture. I love theories. I love frameworks. And then I like drilling down in how to make them practically work. And for me, consulting seemed to offer that opportunity for me. So
Yeah.
that's how I am where I am today, where I end up sitting down with business leaders and with HR leaders and really helping them figure out what's working and what needs to be improved and
Mhm.
how they can do those things practically.
No, that's great. And how long you've been in the consulting business? I mean, is that
15 years?
yes, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Still new enough that I don't mind giving the number out, but long enough that I feel like I am a bit of a grizzled veteran sometimes.
That's great. I know that that I mean I love consulting, and I know that everybody on this call does. I mean, it's great to have such a huge impact on so many different companies and their people, and it's and it's quite different when you're sharing strategies and things like this to ensure that and versus operating in the business. So it's a lot of fun for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk a little bit about in artificial intelligence. I mean, and its use in HR. I know that it's funny because I think that we did a conference on AI and HR. What was it, like 2 years ago? Was that right? Sure.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
a
a
little
couple,
bit.
yeah. So and it's funny because of that was when ChatGPT first. I mean, we've had AI for a long time, right? But it really didn't gain hold, or it was really found as useful, I guess, until it had advances about 2 years ago now. And at that time, it was transformational on how it's going to impact all of us. And using it effectively, there was a lot of fear, and there still is fear in the use of AI. What is that going to do to all our jobs? How is it going to impact us as a society? And even to the even to the extreme of whether or not we're going to, if they're going to start some sci-fi movie and it's going to come to fruition. So I mean, all of that is on the minds of people. So but and one thing I noticed is that AI was being adopted by a lot of different um, I would say adopted by a lot of different professions, and HR was a little slow to the table. I think at the onset there was a lot of concern around, hey, well, if this is going to take away jobs, is this really a people centric technology? And I think that there was a lot of resistance at first. Did you see that, Kathleen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the head on the nail. There's probably about an equal measure of excitement and positive buzz and fear when it comes to AI. And sort of the first thing I'd say to put our discussion in context, a lot of people think of AI and they do think of that sci-fi. They think of that, Hal from 2001 Space Odyssey, or some of those other, technological villains. The reality is that AI is here already. And I mean, it covers everything from, predictive index, chat bots, virtual assistants. It's so integrated into, the technology that we use these days that you're right. Like, people think of AI and the first thing is the chat GPT, who are getting some great marketing and buzz and focus. There's lots of other, machine learning and other AI technology that's being developed there. Um, yeah, and so as a result, you're seeing excitement, you're seeing organizations adopting this technology, and at the same time, you are seeing great resistance. I think I compare it to the Industrial Revolution, where you had individuals who were wholeheartedly embracing using new technologies in manufacturing environments for weaving machines, all of these things. And then at the same time, you had the Luddites, who are going around breaking the machines. And I think that if we frame this as business leaders and as HR professionals, that we want to look at, how we create positive, people practices? How do we nurture the cultures we want to do? How do we want to help our organizations achieve? My thesis, my point of view is that, these tools can be used very effectively and ethically. Um, so we just need to give some leadership on how that is there. And what's interesting is, I think, as the three of you know, I am based in the Toronto, Canada area, and I work with clients locally, and then we work with organizations globally as well. And Canadians in particular have been very conservative and slow to adopt AI in business processes. According to Statistics Canada, probably only about 9 or 10% of Canadian organizations have integrated AI into their business processes. Now, again, I'm going to put a little asterisk on that because their definition is like we've got an AI strategy, or they're not thinking about, what Microsoft is doing with their suite of tools and how AI is embedded. They're not thinking about how Google has embedded AI. So that 9 or 10% is the ones who've like actively, put in chat bots, etc. And I'm going to talk about some specific cases in Canada that have influenced, but I'll just pause and say, yeah, lots of excitement and lots of work for us as HR professionals to do.
But what do you think is some of the reasons why some organizations are reluctant to really put in an AI policy?
Yeah, I think there's two factors. So whenever something isn't really well understood, and when you don't understand sort of the framework, I think it's natural to think about, okay, if we introduce AI into our recruitment process, what is that? Does that increase or does that decrease discrimination in our process? And if you don't understand, because the answer is yes, it could be both of those things, right? Depending on how what tool you apply and how that tool is applied, it could increase discriminatory practices and bias, or it could mitigate it. But when you don't understand how it works, I think the natural inclination is to gravitate towards what you do know. The second piece is, here in Ontario, we have seen legislation that has been a bit of a chiller. Again, going back to the recruitment here in Ontario, we've had a series of legislation called the Working for Workers Act, and it's like I think they're at part 4 or part 5 at this point, and it's very broad ranging. It covers everything from so health and safety, right to disconnect, remote work, an employer's ability to monitor your work. It put in place pay transparency legislation. Like it's covering a very broad range of people and culture topics. And one of the elements is mandating that you must disclose when you're using AI in your recruitment processes. And so, again, that's been almost a bit of a chiller because our organizations aren't really quite sure. If they don't have a really bulletproof strategy on how they're using it, they don't want to disclose it, rightly
Yeah.
so, because it's a Pandora's box. And so that has really, I think, reduced adoption. Again, the part that's not being said is that if you're using an ATS, it more than likely has
Yeah.
AI embedded in there. I think most people initially think of things like when they talk about AI in recruitment processes, they're thinking about using an AI to assess candidates' video interviews before they ever get to interact with someone, or they think about resume screening being done by a bot, not by a
Mhm.
human. And that's where people's interpretation go with it. So yeah, I think it's here. We all just need to reckon with how it's being used, and then how do we communicate its use.
Yeah. So to your point, I mean, I think that it is here. And it's in, whether or not we have a core or an organization may have their own policy and how they're using that internally. I mean, it's in a lot of the systems that they're using every day, and that should be, perhaps disclosed to meet the regulation. But then also, and keeping it, putting a strategy in place on how this is to be used ethically and appropriately going forward. I mean, training needs to happen to ensure that our people are upskilled and know how to use these systems effectively, right?
Absolutely. So there's a strategy and a procedural element, and another comparison I would often make is the use of like psychometric assessments as part of
Mm.
a recruitment process. What assessments are you applying? When are you applying it? How is that driving your decision making? And then how does that, how transparent are you in that process to candidates and to hiring managers as well, because sometimes they don't even quite understand how those things are interacting into the experience and the results. So I think that's the first step. And then, as you rightly said, the reality is that frontline managers, for the most part, particularly when it comes to recruitment, but also when it comes to compensation, performance management, your strategies are enacted by your managers. So making sure that they have the right mindset, making sure that they have the right tools and resources, and that you've trained them in an appropriate use of those tools and resources is really, you're going to rise or fall to the level of your manager's capabilities. So that is really, really important.
Well, I know that Howard is a systems expert. He's been looking at a lot of different systems in HR and so forth. So, what are your thoughts, Howard, on AEI's role in systems in the future?
I was sort of laughing a little bit to myself as we were having the conversation, because some of these things have been in place before AI anyway. It just wasn't under the name of AI. The tools in terms of doing resume review and looking for keywords and themes, some of those things we've already been living with. So now it's this fear of, oh, that now there's something called artificial intelligence that's making these decisions. And I think that's where people need to understand, and corporations, as you pointed out, need to educate the people. It's not making decisions, it's just helping you look at data. There still has to be human element involved, human judgment involved. AI will never replace that. So I think AI is going to be here and with us, and it's going to be really helpful in terms of being able to look and assess large quantum of data. But there still has to be that personal interaction in terms of, okay, what does this all mean? How do we use it? What is not being looked at by AI? For example, in individual resumes, there's circumstances that AI is just not going to pick up. What kind of hardships did some people have to overcome to get to where they are today? I don't think AI will ever pick that up.
No, it's true, and it's. I think you make a really good point. It's here. It's been here for a long time, and I think some of that baggage is carried forward as the technology has evolved. Maybe people's understanding has not evolved with it.
Right.
So I often hear about, there was a case with Amazon where they implemented some AI technology as part of their recruitment process, and then they had to cancel that because they found that the algorithm, that the tool that they were using was actually biased
Mhm.
towards women, and so anything that had sort of like women's, like a reference in the resume, got downgraded. And that was really down to, again, how is this programmed? How is that learning happening? Because again, it's all about the programming and the training at this point, right? It's not, AI is not at that singularity point where it is actually starting to develop on its own. But that was a few years ago, and there's lots of great tools that have taken that learning and ethically, and and very deliberately looked at where are those biases, and how can they be weeded out of the tools. And then now the research does seem to be indicating that the ethical use of a technology is actually going to be less biased than an individual, because we're all biased. We all carry them. It's just how do we mitigate that bias, right? So that's the second piece, is any use of technology. I advocate for that there needs to be governance, there needs to be monitoring, there needs to be really some thought about how it's being used. Because the other example that you see, and this is again one of those other chillers or horror stories, is here in Canada, one of the major airlines implemented a chat bot for customer experience. So rather than waiting on the customer service line, you could interact with the chat bot. And there was a situation where an individual was interacting with the chat bot, and he was given incorrect procedural advice by the chat bot. So essentially what it boiled down to was he was looking to get a bereavement fare, which is something the organization did offer. And he was told, purchase the ticket and then submit to us, and we will discount the fare for you. And that's the direction he was given for the chatbot. So he did that. And then when he subsequently went to get his refund for the difference, the actual live customer service was like, no, that was not our procedure. And so that went to the courts, went through, and Air Canada was actually, it was found in favor of the individual that no, the chat bot is giving direction. It's essentially the same as if an employee gave that direction, and you will now be held to that, right? So we want to make sure that programming and that the advice that's being given, again, putting it into a HR perspective, if we've put in chat bots to help with a self-serve approach to employee experience, those chatbots, if they're giving incorrect information to employees, we're going to have to be held to the advice that those chatbots are giving. So
it's kind of interesting when we think about this impact on the future. I mean, we talk about training chatbots and training AI all the time. But I think that this clearly points out that we need to make sure that we're training them in alignment with how we're training our people to ensure that they're dealing with the same information. So, Shar, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how leaders should think about training their AI and just keeping on top of all of this.
Well, I've been sitting here. I have to tell a story, right, Sam and Howard? Yeah, I mean, I was doing my informal study with my son, who's 21 years old. He is, getting his bioengineering degree. I'm so proud of him. And we were talking about being in college, in the middle of college, and his experience with AI. And so we're talking about the ethical aspects of AI relative to being in college and writing papers and plagiarism, and how the colleges are struggling with keeping on top of that and helping students in that arena. But this is only in the last 2 years that he's really been hit. I mean, our youth is hit, young adults, with AI and how it affects them in their school age areas, right? They are, I mean, my generalization is very familiar with this technology and the ethical aspects of AI in the college setting. And also my older daughter is in the workforce and fully aware, more so than I am. I just pick it on myself, what AI has done in the work setting. So getting to your specific a question here about training, I think to me, it's all about an overall awareness that each of us, and no matter what age we are, have a different experience with AI. And to realize that we really need to bring the human aspect to it. Thank you, Kathleen, for bringing up that example of where something got derailed because it was all focused on, AI and gave misinformation. But our up and coming generation coming into the workforce are fully aware of this and way smart. Not that us Xers or older folks don't understand, but particularly our generation coming up into the workforce, they're over it. They know the technical glitches. They understand how it's kind of impacted their education environment. So I would say, in a training perspective, absolutely be fully aware of this. Also, the benefits and the not so benefits, and as an employee, to be liberated in how to work with these systems, and just understand how it's impacting our changes in our work environment, which is happening on a daily basis. So what do you think, Kathleen? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you really raised an interesting point, which is that, everyone's experience is different. And I think actually that is true of how we interact with AI. But that's actually why I'm really excited about AI, because when you think about, offering flexible or different experiences to different employees, there's a complexity that can really come with that fairly quickly. And AI can actually help us as HR professionals reckon through, all the work that would be required to give different experiences. And the example I give is, I love learning from other industries. And so within the healthcare industry, they introduced, there was a study that looked at having patients have access to AI technology as part of their care plans. And
Right.
what they found was that people were more, they got better results and gave better experiences, particularly at some of their low level inquiries when they were interacting with technology over interacting with a healthcare professional. And part of that was because they didn't mind asking technology what they thought might be a stupid question. They're like, I'm not going to waste my doctors or my nurses or my other healthcare professionals' time asking a question that I should probably know the answer to. They have no hesitation about doing that with the technology. And so they will take more time with the technology, and they will ask a lot more questions. And so that just creates different experiences and addresses needs in a different way. But you want to balance that, right? Like, you don't want them getting all of their healthcare answers from technology. We know what happens when that's the approach that people do. So it's that balance of, when do you go to the technology for the support that you need, and when do you need a human? When do you need expertise and coaching or advice?
So I appreciate that, Kathleen. And I have a long history in healthcare. I would say, from personal experience, it's interesting when the chat box, like through my healthcare system, and the chat box comes up and I'm in that situation. I think it's a change management aspect too, because, it's particularly some individuals or very, whatever demographic, up comes the chat box and asking these medical questions, and the resistance of representative, you know what I mean? I've done that, representative, and then you're yelling at your phone.
Yeah.
And then you hang up, and then you call a different number, representative. But anyway, I think you're right. I think it's totally a change management process where particularly in the healthcare setting, one, it took forever for our physicians to get used to the medical records being electronic versus in paper, because I've actually been an HR person with all, the medical records departments. And converting to an electronic medical record system, it's a change management process to have your physicians and your clinicians to be used to this new process. Now you introduce AI quickly. So not only do your medical staff, physicians, clinicians, plus your patient, that's a change process. And I feel that communication must occur so that people can accept, yes, you will be talking to a chat box perhaps, but don't be intimidated or feel like you're not going to get the care you need. And so it must be challenging in those professions right now.
Yeah, I think, and I think that that's the key thing. And so two things that come to mind for that response. So the first is the change management, and to call back what we were talking about, which is training. So if you think about something like a chat GPT, and if a manager is going to use it to create a job description, Or this is very common with younger generations. They'll use ChatGPT as their coach, right? Here's the situation. How do I respond to this? Right. And there is training that actually needs to go into, because, good advice comes from good prompts with technology like that.
Right.
And so, the change management and the building the mindset and the skill set required to engage with these technologies ethically and effectively is really important. So that's sort of the first thing that comes to mind. And then the second thing is actually just gone. So I think we're coming up to the half hour anyways at this point. So I'll yield the floor for a second.
Right. So as we get towards our conclusion here, Kathleen, where do you think AI is going? Where should HR practitioners really think about implementing AI for the biggest result in the next year or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think the constant evolution that the HR profession has gone through is, we're trying to go from being the personnel department, which is like 30-40 years ago, but like where we were so administratively heavy in what we were doing that squeezed out our ability to do anything from an advisory or a strategic standpoint. And I think that as a productivity hack, AI is going to be fantastic in eliminating some of that administrative burden. So whether it's like Howard was alluding to, where there's so much analysis, there's so much data. A lot of HR teams are putting HR analytics and KPIs into place, and then don't have the time to actually think about, well, okay, what are the insights that are coming from that? And I think AI can really help with that. AI can really help with employee sentiment and other two-way interactions with employees, in a way that then can allow us to focus on the more strategic elements. There's so much we have to reckon with. We have to look at our total rewards and how we interact with employees and how transparent we are in those processes. We need to look at evolving talent acquisition and talent management processes so that they're less compliance and administrative and more results and experience focused. Employees want greater focus on cultural elements, not just vision and values, but they want to know as an organization, where do we stand on social justice? Where do we stand on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Where do we stand on employee development and sponsorship and mentorship, right? And all of these programs and all of these outcomes require a lot of time and effort and thought and intention. And if we can get out of the administration and get more time on these higher impact areas, I would be so happy for us all.
No kidding, for sure. And so, Kathleen, as our listeners are kind of pondering about this AI and its ethical use, and also in particular the Canadian environment, how can they get a hold of you to learn more about these topics?
Yeah, so great question. So I love talking about these topics, as you can tell by the fact that I went a little bit over. So I am always happy for individuals to reach out through social media, and then also engage with some of the content that I am publishing in this area. Always happy to make connections between individuals. And then I guess lastly, at the Talent Company, we do have our monthly top of mind webinars, which are specifically designed, much like your podcast is here, to address the topics and the matters that are top of mind for HR professionals. And so visiting our website, so thetalentcompany.co, no M on the end there. If you visit thetalent.co, you can see our upcoming webinars and register, and let's continue to make connections, share our insights, share our experiences, and share solutions with each other where it's appropriate.
Great.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on here today, Kathleen. Thank you for sharing all your experience and expertise in on this topic.
Absolutely, Shar and Howard. I really appreciated your stories as well, and looking forward to continuing to discuss this with you too.
Great.
Absolutely. And like all of our listeners, I've sent you a LinkedIn request already.
Excellent.
So I think all of our listeners should connect in with you, at least on that platform, and look at your insights. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to the People Strategy Forum, and we'll see you next week. Take care.